My husband thought he was throwing a party to declare me legally insane. He didn't know the guests of honor were two undercover cops, and the evening's entertainment was a video of him poisoning me. He planned to break my mind, but he only broke the lock on my cage. If you've ever felt betrayed so deeply it remade you, then press like and stay with me. You'll want to see how this ends. On the morning of my 32nd birthday, a crisp Tuesday on October 24th, our house smelled of coffee and false comfort. The air outside our suburban Ohio home was tinged with the sweet, decaying scent of autumn leaves, and the first ray of sunlight cut across the polished hardwood floor, landing on a single, perfectly wrapped gift on the kitchen counter. Mark, my husband of 6 years, placed a steaming mug next to it. "Happy birthday, honey," he said, his voice the same warm, steady baritone that had once felt like home. He kissed my temple, his hand coming to rest on my shoulder. "Feeling any better today? Less foggy?" His brow furrowed with that practiced concern I had come to both rely on and dread. For the past 6 months, my world had been shrinking, clouded by a relentless brain fog. My short-term memory, once sharp as a tack, had become a sieve. I'd walk into a room and forget why I was there. I'd lose my car keys only to have Mark find them in the sugar bowl. Last week, I'd missed a major deadline for a client, something unheard of in my freelance graphic design career, because I'd sworn the due date was a week later. Each incident was a small, sharp cut to my confidence, leaving me feeling frayed and incompetent. Panic attacks, once a stranger to me, had become unwelcome visitors, ambushing me in the grocery store or in the dead of night, leaving me breathless and terrified. "A little," I lied, forcing a smile as I picked up the mug. "Doctor." Miller had called it generalized anxiety, likely triggered by a genetic predisposition from my mother's side. He'd prescribed a low-dose anti-anxiety medication, which Mark dutifully handed to me every morning with a glass of water. "Forgetting things again, honey?" he'd say, his tone dripping with a pity that made my skin crawl. "Don't worry, I'm here to be your memory for you." He was at work, and I was cleaning out the hall closet, a mundane birthday task to feel some semblance of control. When my old iPad charger broke, I remembered Mark had an older model stored in a box in our home office, a relic from before we'd upgraded. The box was tucked away on a high shelf, covered in a thin film of dust. Inside, beneath a tangle of old cables, was the iPad. I pressed the home button out of curiosity, and to my surprise, the screen flickered to life, showing 47% battery and a lock screen full of notifications. Green iMessage bubbles from a name that made the air leave my lungs in a single, silent rush. Chloe. Chloe. My best friend since college. The one who held my hand when my mother passed away. The godmother I'd have chosen for the children Mark and I were supposedly trying for. Her name was on his screen. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. We all shared an Apple account for music and apps. He must have forgotten to log out of iMessage on this device years ago. It was a digital ghost, a time capsule of betrayal. With a trembling finger, I swiped the screen open. He hadn't even bothered to set a passcode. The message thread was recent, from just last night. "Chloe, is she still taking the pills? Is it working? Mark." Like a charm. She barely remembers what she had for breakfast. Found her phone in the refrigerator this morning and didn't even question it. She's completely convinced she's losing her mind. Chloe. Good. The lawyer says we need another few months of this to build a solid case for incompetence. Her signature on that power of attorney won't mean a thing if she's not certifiable. Chloe. Did she get the inheritance papers from her mom's estate yet? Mark. Came in yesterday. $800,000 for the house is a conservative estimate. Once I have guardianship, we sell it. And we're on a beach in Costa Rica before she even knows what happened. Chloe, God, I can't wait. I love you. Mark, I love you more. Almost there, baby. Just a little longer. Time seemed to collapse. The closet, the dust motes dancing in the light, the faint hum of the furnace, it all faded into a roaring in my ears. The brain fog, the lost keys, the missed deadlines, the panic attacks. It wasn't genetics. It wasn't anxiety. It was poison. It was Mark and Chloe. My Chloe was his accomplice. The bottle of pills on my nightstand wasn't medicine, it was a weapon. The house I grew up in, the last piece of my mother I had left, wasn't a home, it was a prize to be stolen. My first instinct was primal, a blinding surge of rage that made me want to storm into his office, to smash that iPad on his desk and watch the smug concern melt from his face. But then, something colder and sharper cut through the fury, a voice that sounded eerily like my mother's. Think, Emily. Don't feel, think. If I confronted him now, he would deny it. He would gaslight me further, call me hysterical, and use my outburst as proof of my instability. He and Chloe would cover their tracks. No. They had shown me their entire playbook. They thought I was a broken, confused mess. And that was now my greatest advantage. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly terrifyingly clear. The fog was gone, burned away by the acid of betrayal. I took a photo of the entire message thread with my phone, my breath held tight in my chest. Then, I carefully deleted the pictures from the iPad's camera roll and logged the device out of his Apple ID, severing the connection for good. I placed it back in the box, beneath the cables, and pushed it back onto the high shelf. A ghost returned to its grave. That night, when Mark handed me my nightly pill with a loving smile, I palmed it. I pretended to swallow, then excused myself to the bathroom and flushed the small, white tablet down the toilet. I stood there, gripping the cold porcelain sink, and looked at my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the same one from this morning. Her eyes were different, older, colder, and alight with a terrible, clarifying fire. He thought he was dealing with a fragile, broken woman. He had no idea he had just armed a survivor, and I was going to find out just how deep this conspiracy went, piece by damning piece. The first morning without the pill was like waking up in a different world. It wasn't a sudden jolt, but a slow, quiet dawn of the mind. The sunlight filtering through the blinds didn't feel abrasive. It felt warm. The aroma of Mark's brewing coffee was sharp and distinct, not a dull background scent. For the first time in months, my thoughts felt linear, like neatly arranged books on a shelf instead of a chaotic pile tumbled on the floor. The fog had not just lifted, it had been ripped away, revealing a landscape of stark, brutal clarity. And in that clarity, I saw the enemy sleeping peacefully beside me, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm of absolute deceit. That day began the performance of my life. I became the Emily he expected to see, a little lost, a little slower, clutching my coffee mug like a lifeline. When he held out the small white pill and a glass of water, his eyes full of that suffocating sympathy, I met his gaze with a look of grateful dependency. "Thank you, honey. I don't know what I'd do without you." The pill would rest under my tongue until he turned away, the chalky taste a bitter reminder of his intentions. The walk to the bathroom, the faint splash as it hit the water, became a small, secret ritual of rebellion. Each flush was a victory, washing away another layer of his control. With my mind sharpening each day, I started to notice the architecture of his gaslighting. It was meticulous, insidious, and terrifyingly effective. One afternoon, I deliberately placed the TV remote on the center of the coffee table. An hour later, after Mark had come home and gone upstairs, it was gone. I found it later, nestled between the cushions of a love seat we never used. Last month, I would have dissolved into a puddle of self-recrimination. How could I be so careless? Now, I saw it for what it was, a calculated move in a game I never knew I was playing. The thermostat he swore I'd turned down to a frigid 65 degrees. The houseplants he claimed I'd forgotten to water for weeks, their leaves suddenly brown and brittle. The beautiful watercolor painting my mother had made, which he insisted had always hung slightly crooked on the dining room wall. Each was a tiny, deliberate act of sabotage designed to make me doubt my own sanity. He wasn't just my poisoner. He was the ghost in my own home, haunting me with my supposed incompetence. The need for proof became an obsession, a cold fire in my gut. An affair and a financial plot were one thing. Systematically drugging me was another. This crossed a line into a darkness I hadn't imagined. I needed something tangible, something unassailable. My chance came on a Thursday evening. Mark was in a conference call in his office, his voice a low, confident drone through the closed door. I knew he kept his briefcase in the bedroom closet. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I slipped inside, the scent of his cologne hanging in the air like a taunt. The case was unlocked. Inside, beneath a stack of financial reports, was a leather portfolio. My fingers trembled as I unzipped it, and there it was. Not my prescription bottle, but another one, identical in size and shape. The label, however, was different. It wasn't from our local pharmacy. It was a generic bottle, the kind you get from a mail-order service, with a sticky, residue-covered label that had been partially peeled off, leaving just enough to read the drug's name, lorazepam, 2 milligrams, a high-strength sedative. My prescription was for a mild 10-milligram dose of Lexapro, an antidepressant. They were entirely different medications. I quickly pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I Googled lorazepam side effects. The list appeared, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Drowsiness, dizziness, loss of coordination, memory problems, confusion, difficulty concentrating. It was a checklist of my life for the past 6 months. The brain fog had a name, and it was the name on that bottle. He hadn't just swapped my pills, he had replaced my gentle anti-anxiety medication with a powerful tranquilizer designed to incapacitate, to confuse, to erase, to make me weak enough to sign anything, to make me appear unstable enough for a judge to strip away my rights. I snapped a picture of the bottle, my hand steady now with cold fury. Then I found what he was hiding underneath it, a neatly folded document. The letterhead read, Sterling Law Group, an unfamiliar name. It was a durable power of attorney form, already filled out. It granted Mark complete and total control over all my assets, financial and medical, effective immediately upon the signature of a physician certifying my mental incapacitation. My name was printed on the signature line, waiting, and at the bottom, notarized and signed, was the name of a lawyer I'd never heard of, Richard Sterling. This was the solid case for incompetence Chloe had mentioned. This was the final checkmate. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, my movements precise and silent. I closed the briefcase, placed it back in the closet, and walked out of the bedroom. When I looked in the mirror, my face was pale, but my eyes were stones. The hurt had burned away, leaving behind something harder, something unbreakable. This was no longer just about survival. This was about justice. He didn't want a divorce. He wanted to annihilate me, to erase my existence and walk away with my mother's legacy. I spent the rest of that night in a fever of planning. My freelance work had given me a decent cushion of savings in an account Mark didn't know about, my runaway fund, a habit my mother had insisted on. It was time to use it. The next morning, I feigned a severe, dizzy spell. "Mark, honey, I think my anxiety is getting worse," I whispered, my voice trembling convincingly. "I can barely stand up. I think maybe you're right. Maybe I do need more help." The look of triumph in his eyes was fleeting but unmistakable. It was all the confirmation I needed. While he was at work, I ordered 3 of the smallest, highest resolution hidden cameras I could find online, along with a voice-activated audio recorder, one for the kitchen, one for his office, and one for our bedroom. They would arrive in 2 days. He thought he was closing the net around me. He had no idea I was weaving one of my own. You've got it. The trap is about to be set. The 2 days I waited for the cameras to arrive were the longest of my life. I moved through my house like a ghost, my performance of the fragile, deteriorating wife becoming my second skin. I would stand in the middle of the kitchen, a vacant look on my face, until Mark came to gently guide me to a chair. "What were you looking for, honey?" he'd ask, his voice a perfect symphony of patience and sorrow. I don't remember," I'd whisper, letting my eyes fill with manufactured tears. I saw the grim satisfaction on his face, the way he exchanged a quick, knowing text with Chloe when he thought I wasn't looking. They were savoring their victory, completely oblivious to the fact that their victim was now the predator. The package arrived in a plain brown box, as discreet as promised. Mark was out for a run. My hands were steady as I unpacked the tiny devices. One camera, disguised as a USB phone charger, went into the wall socket by the kitchen counter, its lens perfectly positioned to see the spot where he prepared my morning tea and medication. The second, a mock smoke detector, was for his office, placed directly above his desk. The third, a digital clock, sat on my nightstand, a silent witness to our shared bedroom. The audio recorder, no bigger than a stick of gum, was taped to the underside of the dining room table where he often took his calls. My home, once a prison of his design, was now my surveillance state. I let the cameras run for a week, playing the part of a woman fading away. My act grew bolder. I forgot his mother's birthday. I lost his car keys, forcing him to take an Uber to work. I'd start a sentence and trail off into confused silence. Each act of feigned incompetence was a piece of bait, and he took it every single time. His frustration was mounting, but it was tempered by the thrill of his plan coming to fruition. I could feel it, the low hum of anticipation radiating from him. He was getting impatient. He was getting sloppy. The breakthrough came on the 8th day. The footage from the kitchen camera was the smoking gun I'd prayed for. The video was time-stamped 7:02 a.m. It showed Mark, his back mostly to the camera, standing at the counter. He took my mug, poured hot water for my chamomile tea, and then he reached into his pocket. He pulled out the generic lorazepam bottle. His movements were swift, practiced. He twisted the cap off, tapped 2 small white pills into a mortar, and with a pestle, ground them into a fine white powder. The act was so casual, so devoid of hesitation. It was chilling. He carefully tipped the powder into my tea, stirring it with a spoon until it dissolved completely. Then, he placed the mug on the counter, turned around, and called out, "Honey, your tea is ready." His voice laced with the same false affection as always. I saved the video file to 3 separate cloud accounts and a thumb drive I hid in a hollowed-out book. My hands weren't shaking. I felt nothing but a cold, crystalline resolve. This single piece of footage was enough to send him to prison. But it wasn't enough for me. I didn't just want to stop him. I wanted to dismantle his entire world in front of everyone he had fooled. His impatience finally gave way. That Friday, he sat me down on the sofa, his face a mask of solemn concern. "Emily," he began, taking my hands in his, "we need to talk. I'm so worried about you. This isn't just anxiety anymore. You're getting worse. You need more help than I can give you." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I spoke to Richard Sterling, a friend of a friend who specializes in these things. He thinks it would be best if I took over handling, well, everything. The finances, the house, your care. It would just be temporary, until you're feeling like yourself again. It's a formality. Really. Just signing a piece of paper so I can legally take the burden off your shoulders." The Hopmat Gyajin, the family meeting, was set for the following Wednesday night. He'd invited my Aunt Carol, my older brother, and of course, his own parents. Chloe would be there naturally. For moral support, the lawyer, Richard Sterling, would also be in attendance to explain the legalities and witness the signing. The stage was set for the final act of my destruction. And so, I began setting my own stage. I called my Aunt Carol, a retired nurse with a spine of steel who had never fully trusted Mark. I told her everything, sending her the video as proof. The fury in her voice was a balm to my soul. "That son of a bitch," she hissed. "Don't you worry, Emily. I'll be there. I'll play my part." Next, I needed law enforcement, but I couldn't just walk into a police station. Mark would find out. I needed someone discreet, someone who understood the nuances of domestic abuse and white-collar crime. A friend from a women's entrepreneurship group gave me the name of a private investigator who, in turn, connected me to 2 detectives in the financial crimes unit, a man and a woman who specialized in cases of elder and dependent adult fraud. I met them in a quiet coffee shop miles from my home. I laid out the entire story, from the iMessage screenshots to the power of attorney document to the damning video. Their faces hardened as they listened. When the video of Mark poisoning my tea played on my laptop, the female detective, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, looked at me with a mixture of horror and respect. "He's not just trying to steal from you," she said, her voice low. "He's endangering your life. This is aggravated assault at the very least." The plan we hatched was simple, elegant, and brutal. The 2 detectives, Jenkins and her partner, Detective Miller, would attend the meeting disguised as my psychological support team, a new age therapist and a life coach I had supposedly hired. They would be my witnesses. They would be the ones to make the arrest. All I had to do was get Mark to the final moment, to put the pen in my hand, to believe he had won. I spent the next few days in a state of hyper-focus, every action calibrated for the final performance. I was a puppet master pulling the strings of my own tragedy, and the final curtain was about to rise. The night of the family meeting. A heavy, expectant silence hung in our living room. The air was thick with unspoken agendas. Mark had arranged the chairs in a semicircle, like a tribunal, with me in a single armchair at the center. It was meant to be an intervention. It was, in fact, an execution. He hovered around me, a perfect portrait of the devoted husband, fluffing my pillow, offering me a glass of water, his touch making my skin crawl. His parents sat on the sofa, their faces etched with a genuine, painful concern that almost made me feel a pang of guilt. My brother, always easily led, looked nervous. Only Aunt Carol met my gaze, a flicker of steel in her eyes that told me she was ready. Chloe arrived last, her expression a masterclass in feigned sympathy. She rushed to my side, enveloping me in a hug that felt like being wrapped in a shroud. "Oh, Em," she breathed, her voice a theatrical whisper. "I'm so glad you're finally letting us help you. We've all been so worried." I let myself go limp in her arms, playing the part of the fragile doll to perfection. At exactly 7:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. Mark opened it to reveal Richard Sterling, a man with a cheap suit and the predatory smile of a bottom feeder. And behind him, Detectives Jenkins and Miller. I had briefed my family. "These are Dr. Evans and Mr. Cole," I said, my voice deliberately soft and unsteady. My new support team. I wanted them here." Mark's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, an unexpected variable in his equation, but my apparent fragility disarmed him. A broken woman would seek out quacks. It only strengthened his case. The meeting began. Mark spoke first, his voice resonating with rehearsed sincerity. He recounted my decline, citing the lost keys, the missed appointments, the paranoid episodes. His parents nodded sadly. My brother looked at the floor. Chloe dabbed at a dry eye. It was a symphony of lies. And I was its silent muse, finally. Richard Sterling cleared his throat and produced the power of attorney document from his worn leather briefcase. "Emily," he said, his tone oozing condescension. "This document is a safety net. It allows Mark to manage your affairs, to protect your assets, specifically the lovely home your mother left you, while you focus on getting better. It's the loving thing to do." He placed the document on the coffee table in front of me, alongside a heavy, expensive-looking fountain pen. "You just need to sign right here." This was the moment. The entire room held its breath. Mark leaned forward, his face a mixture of anticipation and feigned compassion. "It's okay, honey," he murmured, his hand covering mine. "Let me take care of you. Just sign." I looked down at the paper, then up at his hopeful, treacherous face, and I smiled, a real smile. It wasn't the vacant, confused smile he was used to. It was sharp and clear and utterly cold. His own smile faltered, for the first time. A flicker of genuine unease crossed his face. "You know, Mark," I said, my voice suddenly strong and clear, resonating through the silent room. "You're right. It is time for a change. But I think we have some different ideas about what that means." I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, my other hand, hidden by the arm of the chair, gripped a small remote control. With a single, deliberate press of a button, the large flat-screen television on the wall, which had been displaying a serene screensaver of a waterfall, flickered to life. The video began to play. The image was crystal clear. Our kitchen, 7:02 a.m. The room was silent except for the faint sound of a bird chirping outside. Then, Mark appeared on screen. The entire room watched, transfixed, as my husband, my loving, concerned husband, casually ground 2 white pills into powder and stirred them into a cup of chamomile tea. The camera's microphone picked up the soft clinking of the spoon against the ceramic, a sound that now seemed as loud as a gunshot. It captured him turning, a gentle smile on his face, as he called out, "Honey, your tea is ready." A collective gasp went through the room. Mark's mother let out a choked sob. My brother shot to his feet, his face white with horror. Chloe looked as if she'd been struck by lightning, her mouth agape. Mark himself was frozen, the color draining from his face, his eyes locked on the screen in utter disbelief. He had been so sure of his victory, he hadn't even considered the possibility of my awareness. The video ended, and the screen went black. I placed the remote on the table. "For 6 months," I said, my voice ringing with an authority no one in that room had heard from me before. "You have been poisoning me with a high-dose sedative, systematically trying to destroy my mind, all to have me declared incompetent so you and my best friend—" I turned my gaze to Chloe, who flinched as if physically struck, "could steal my mother's house and run away with the money." Before Mark or Sterling could react, Detectives Jenkins and Miller stood up. "Actually," Detective Jenkins said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence as she unclipped the badge from her belt. "It's called aggravated assault and conspiracy to commit fraud." "Mark Carson," Detective Miller said, stepping toward him, "you are under arrest." The chaos that erupted was swift and decisive. Mark lunged, not at me, but for the door, a cornered animal trying to flee. Miller intercepted him easily. Richard Sterling began babbling about misunderstandings and attorney-client privilege, but Jenkins was already cuffing him. "We have a warrant for your office, Mr. Sterling. We're very interested to see how many other incompetent clients you have." Chloe was a sobbing, incoherent mess, swearing she didn't know about the poison, that she thought it was just an affair, a plan for a new life. Jenkins looked at her with utter disdain. "You knew enough. You're an accessory." As they led Mark away, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred, he locked eyes with me one last time. "You bitch!" he snarled. "No, Mark," I replied, feeling a profound, quiet calm settle over me. "I'm the woman you underestimated." It was over. The legal battle was messy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Mark was sentenced to a significant prison term, his life of charming deceit reduced to a number in the state penitentiary. Richard Sterling was disbarred, his predatory career finished, and Chloe, in exchange for her testimony, received probation, but her reputation was annihilated. She became a pariah, a ghost in the city she once navigated with such confidence. I sold the house, the beautiful prison my mother had left me. The sale closed not with a sense of loss, but with the exhilarating feeling of liberation. With the $800,000, I moved downtown and opened my own design studio, Clarity Collective, dedicated to creating brand identities for women-led startups. I poured my pain, my anger, and my newfound strength into my art, helping other women build their dreams on foundations of their own making. The betrayal didn't break me, it forged me. It taught me the most brutal and necessary lesson. Sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is to become the person you never thought you had to be, a warrior in your own story. My question to you is, when life pushes you to the brink, do you crumble, or do you build a new world from the rubble? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience.